Talk heavy. Yeah, talk heavy, huh? Talk heavy, Heavy going live from the field with the realness. Heavy on the scene, huh? Talk heavy, teasy. Heavy going live from the field with the realness. Heavy going live from the field with the realness.
What's going on, beautiful people? Kira Savvy here, Savvy Kira on Instagram and Facebook. And this is, you already know, literally just talk radio. To acknowledge with knowledge. Episode 72 for the podcast, episode 8 for the vlog series Talk Heavy TV. First and foremost, a very happy new year to one and all. I hope you all are doing well, you are safe, and you are healthy. And speaking of the new year, we are in the 22nd year of the Y2K experience in the 21st century. And in the 21st century, we had what's known as the dawn of a new age or the dawn and the rise of technology. And with that rise of technology came an exploration into social media. We see now in the year 2022 how social media has really shaped our entire lives, sometimes even owned in on our existence, or even creating an alternate reality. I like to say living in the matrix, so to speak. So, what better person to talk about that than my next guest, Tyler Hinton, author of The Mirage? I really wanted to make sure that we did an exploration on the impact of social media and how it affects our mental health. So, Tyler, thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kira. That was a very nice introduction. I appreciate
Well, I try my best. And as we were talking about technology and social media, we just had like a slight glitch where the show wasn't even recording, and
you.
it definitely took a toll on my mental health. So, Tyler, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and why you came up with Mirage and what was your personal experience with social media?
Yeah. So, a little bit about me. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and I went to Michigan State University for undergrad. So, I received my degree in journalism and media marketing while at Michigan State. So, I've always been kind of a writer. Like, writing has always probably been one of my strongest skills. And, when I was in high school, I took like advanced placement English. So, I've kind of always found a home there. And professionally, I've worked as a human resources business partner and as a business consultant. So I've gotten a feel for what it's like to kind of be a writer and then what it's also like to kind of be a business person, a businessman, and trying to find my space there. Um, and so I think you asked me what led to me writing Mirage. Is that correct? Yes. So the book is titled Mirage: How Social Media Impacts the Way We Think, Feel, and Behave. And I wrote it for a number of reasons. It was a few years ago, probably like late 2019, early 2020, when I was out and about, just like living life. And I remember walking into a room and just seeing all these people just locked into their phones. Everyone's like just doing this motion, and I just got really curious about it because I started thinking like, what kind of got us to this place to where we all are so in tune with these devices, right? And I was curious to learn like how does social media make people feel on a day-to-day basis. So I just started reading articles and learning information. And as I read and read and read, I learned some things that were kind of alarming to me, things that I thought were troubling in terms of the mental health well, the way social media is able to impact our mental health. And a lot of the information I was finding wasn't positive. And so that ultimately led to the other pieces of the book. And I began reading other people's books about like um, addictions to screen time and addictions to different apps. And I started honestly thinking here, like, what makes someone want to go viral, right? Like, what makes someone want to be popular online? Um, and I also try to think to myself, what makes someone do something like that I might consider to be crazy and then post it on the internet? Like, what leads them to do something that I would never do? And as I began to pay attention, that's what led to me writing the book because I started learning so much information. And honestly, Kira, I didn't find a lot of people um, of color that were writing about these topics. So when I kind of looked in the mirror, I said, I have a hard time finding, or at least in terms of books, like published books, I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me that were writing about these apps and the way they're impacting our lives. So I felt like, well, maybe I should jump in and just see what that could be like for me and see if I can deliver something that people can gain from.
And you know what? I think that all comes down to us paying attention. Because I remember, like, one of the reasons I kind of stopped frequenting bars and restaurants and social environments is you see everybody engaging on their phone, and there's less of an engagement with each other, in a
Mhm.
social aspect. So I find it rather interesting that you came up with those topics just by, paying attention and looking around your environment. So I want to jump into living in a world of cancel culture. There's this concept of we can actually say and even express how we may feel about certain subjects or our views, even from a political or personal standpoint, without feeling like we're going to be judged behind it and ultimately called to be canceled, so they say. How do
Mhm.
you think that aspect of social media really affects our mental health?
Yeah, that's a really great point here. So I see it kind of in threefold, and I actually talk about it a little bit in the book. Um, I think that cancel culture kind of minimizes the truth of what we are as human beings, right? Because I look at it like this, Kara, like you could be the most amazing person in the world to someone one day, and then the next day you could make a huge mistake that impacts people as well. Because that's what humans do, right? We are complicated and we have the ability to make a good decision and a bad decision within like the same seconds. Um, and when we talk about cancel culture, oftentimes it doesn't acknowledge that, right? And so there's a part of me that wants to kind of break it down and to put it in a more simpler form. And I see it kind of in threefold. So um, I think that before canceling people or trying to deplatform them, we should try to be empathetic and try to educate people, right? So if we have the ability to, we should try to teach people and be educators to them if we can actually reach that person and say, hey, you know what? I saw you said this thing, or I saw you have this belief. This is what I actually believe it is, and this is what I think you should look into to reconsider your opinion, right? So if we can, try to teach them first. Um, Secondly, like I said, try to have some empathy for that person and understand their situation. But at the same time, I do think at times it is appropriate for people to not necessarily cancel people, but to um, stop showing support, right? So to say, hey, you know what? I really like this artist's music or whatever it may be, but that person made this choice. It affected me in this way. And so I decided that I don't want to support that person anymore, right? I think that is very fair, right? Um, so I do think cancel culture is problematic and it's something that creates this weird energy to where people will now actually, depending on what you do and depending on how offended they are, can really try to ruin your life. There are people in this world to where if you say or do the wrong thing, they could, or what they perceive to be the wrong thing, they could absolutely try to find out like where you live, where you go to school, where your kids go to school, and then they could essentially take actions to have a real impact on your life. So I do think it's complicated, but over anything, I kind of see it in that threefold piece. So try to teach people, right? Over anything, try to educate, try to be empathetic and realize that we all are people and we do silly things. And then lastly, understand that if you are truly offended or hurt by what someone did, it does make sense to withdraw support from that person.
And you know what, Tyler? Like that makes perfect sense. And I think the cancel culture aspect really comes from us putting social media on a different platform in our lives to where, it doesn't really and necessarily match our realities and the aspect of wanting to be seen. So, in regards to our mental health, I say that we definitely should probably ease up and not take it so seriously. Why do you think social media shouldn't be taken so seriously as it is?
Yeah, that's a great question. For more than one reason, right? Uh, I would say my top two reasons right now, and I kind of waver on these because there are so many reasons why you should kind of not take social media so seriously. I would say number one, from like a people and relationship perspective, we have to realize that we are only really seeing on social media what people choose to put out into the world, right? So I could be going through a hard time. I could have $40 in my bank account right now, but I'm probably not going to put that on my Instagram. I'm probably not going to tweet that, right? A very small amount of people will say, "Hey, I'm really struggling," but the great majority of people aren't going to put those things out into the world. We're more likely to show our highlights and show the things about our lives that we enjoy that make us happy. We're more likely to show, when we travel to a new place or when we have a child or when we spend time with our family on holidays and things of that nature, which makes sense, right? Um, but so when we have to look back and realize, you know what, social media in all forms is really just what people choose to show. It doesn't make sense for us to take it very seriously because it is only what people are wanting to give us, right? Um, so there's the piece there, and I honestly believe here that's a part of social media in all aspects, whether it be just the apps people use for fun or even like the serious apps like LinkedIn. If you use like a LinkedIn or these apps for professionals, people will post, their amazing jobs and, show those kind of things. But you may not know that person works like 60 hours a week, 60, 70 hours a week, and they're having a really hard time. So you really don't know. Um, the second part of that is why we shouldn't take it as serious is that we have to realize that we live in a really odd time to where people can share information that they really don't know is true. And it's really weird and dangerous now because like I could get on Twitter and have a tweet that has, let's say, four sentences in it about COVID or something of that nature. And three of those things could be 100% true. And they could be, proven and tested, whatever that looks like. And then the last thing, I could just make it up. And if it sounds good enough and if it gains enough traction, it can go out into the world and it can then impact other people's lives. And it can also impact the decisions they make. So going back to that behavior piece that I talk about in the book, it can impact that person's real life and choices that they make when they put their phone down and when they're no longer connected to this app. So, the misinformation slash disinformation piece is, I think, one of those things that we really have to realize, and that I think is one of those parts of social media that we should say, you know what, we shouldn't take this as serious because I have to realize that everything I see on this app is not true or correct.
Right. And you know what? As a fellow journalist, I know that finding the right information is of like the utmost importance,
Mhm.
like people putting misinformation out there and us holding it on as truth. And then we pass misinformation along and it just creates one big cycle of a lie that we all actually decide to believe.
Yes.
So I remember at like the top of 2019, I was at work and I was on my phone. Shouldn't have been
Mhm.
because I was working, right? And I dropped it. My phone broke, completely blacked out. And I rushed to get to another phone. Like in that hour and that time of me not having a cell phone, not having access to anything, to social media, I started to ask myself, like, well, is this something that I really need all the time? I
Mhm.
felt like my phone blacking out was saying, put your phone down, you know?
Mhm.
And I actually took a hiatus for an entire year. I stayed free and clear of social media. And I have to say, it was one of the most freeing experiences. So
Mhm.
that may not work for everybody. You know, some people may need social media to feel like they can be okay, to be connected, you know, to others. And you mentioned COVID. In the world of COVID, you know, that was the one thing that we all had, to stay connected. So, how can we decrease the effects of social media and how that may affect our mental health?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really great point, Kara. And one thing that you realized in that is that maybe you were too connected, or maybe you were spending too much time on those apps, and that's great that you could see that. Um, because everybody can't see that, and when we think about like really young people, right? So let's think about people that are they're 17, 18, 20, mid 20s. They are kind of growing up in this time where we're always connected in this way. So imagine how they feel if they break their phone. They may be like, I have to get reconnected. Like there's no other way of living, right? Because they've been conditioned to think that this is an imperative part of their life. So I'm glad that you were able to see that. I think it looks different for everyone in terms of realizing if you need to disconnect or what your connection level should look like. Because different people use it for different uses, right? So you could start an online business, and a part of your business could be marketing yourself on social media. So you may have to stay connected, right? Whereas someone else could just be using it for leisure. So everyone kind of has their own level and their own space with it. But what I try to encourage people to do is to try to, number one, understand how is social media potentially impacting your mental health. So that's the first thing. Because you can spend hours at a time on an app, and there's a potential that it is not impacting you in a serious negative way, right? If you just spend a few hours a day on social media, let's say 2 or 3, because that's average. But if you're someone that when you get online, you're comparing your life to other people, or it makes you feel uncomfortable about the way you look, or your body, or your financial status, or your career, or with your family life, then you have to really think like, okay, when I get on this app and I scroll and I intake this information, how do I feel afterwards? What's going through my mind? How connected do I feel to other people? How happy and full do I feel with myself? And then you're able to answer those questions and you're saying to yourself, well, you know what? I'm not as happy, or I do feel deprived, or this is making me depressed. That's when you then have to step back and realize, you know what? I need to spend less time on these apps. And the good thing about our phones, whether it be iPhone, Android, they can give you data and show you how much time you're spending online. They can show you, hey, you know what, you spend 30 minutes a day on Instagram, an hour a day on TikTok, whatever that looks like. And so in those instances, we should really try to learn our own behavior, right? So learn ourselves first, and then that'll put you in a good position to disconnect and to say to yourself, you know what, okay, right now I spend 4 hours a day on social media. I want to make a goal to spend 3 hours, right? So there'll be times when I don't connect. So maybe during the day when I'm at work, I say, you know what, I'm not going to look at any of these apps. I'm going to leave them alone. And then maybe I'll look in the evening, right? So that's what I kind of encourage people to do. Learn yourself first, and then it'll put you in a good position to decide whether you need to disconnect or not.
You know, and I think that's like sound and important advice, you know, really being able to determine when you're supposed to disconnect, just to have time to be within yourself and process your own thoughts without any influence behind that, you know?
Mhm.
So I want to discuss algorithms and how they work, because I feel like social media now has had a way to even be connected to our subconscious mind. Like Facebook asks, what's on your mind? It's almost like they want to know what's going on in our minds and what our thought process is. So I found it interesting that there are algorithms set in place based on, our popularity or based on how many views we have. And I saw like at the end of 2020 now, I had like 400 friends. And I went from 400 to like over 1,000. And it just kept growing and it kept counting. And I know that had something to do with the way I was placed in the algorithm. Can you explain a little bit about how that works?
Yeah. And so that's a great question. So algorithms are essentially sets of rules that the social media apps use to get desired results, right? They're like formulas. So they know that they're going to input or you're going to provide them with certain information. They're going to put it into a system and then it's going to spit out some more information to them, which allows them to do multiple things. It can allow them to figure out who would be interested in your content and interested in you and your life. And it over anything for the average social media user, it allows, the Facebook and TikToks and Instagrams of the world to figure out what content to cater to you. So that when you see an ad or when something pops up in your timeline, it makes sense for you to see it. It makes sense for that to be in front of you so that advertiser is getting the most out of their dollars, right? So recently, I think I've been complaining and probably texting and looking up like new shavers, like for my hair, right? And so now, whenever I get on Facebook, I see like three ads for like these quick shavers. They're like, "This is the most amazing thing you've ever seen," right? So that is the algorithm doing its job on a very good level, on a high level, because they know I'm bald headed, and they're like, he wants to buy this, put it in front of him until he buys it, right? So that's what they're doing. That's what makes sense for them to do. Um, Kira, the interesting thing about it is that we have to realize that companies like, Facebook is like almost $1 trillion company or something around that. So they have a lot of really intelligent people that work for them that understand human behavior, that understand how people think, and they understand how people connect to their phones and how those phones connect to apps and how all those things intertwine so that they can make money, right? They know how to make money. They are very, very good at it. And so the algorithms are a really big part of that because they keep us connected and they learn a lot of information about us. Um, the last piece of that, and I'll let you jump back in, is that we also volunteer a lot of information because when we sign up for the apps, we very few people read those agreements, right? If you sign up for an app, there's all this fine print, right? And essentially, we volunteer a lot of who we are and what our lives look like. So for the most part, we make it, or the average person makes it pretty easy for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter to learn a lot of stuff about them because we're agreeing to it. We're saying, you know what, we want to be on this app, so hey, learn all about me. Um, so that's a kind of an overview of how those things work.
Well, I'm telling you, Tyler, you have excuse me, the script and a guide to really learning how social media affects us and impacts us. And I really feel that's important for all of us to know how to disconnect in this day and age. So please tell us, where can we find Mirage, and in light of social media, where can we follow you? Where can we see your work and the things that you're involved in?
Yeah, yeah. So Mirage is available on Amazon. So I did the paperback book, the ebook, and the audiobook. Different people. I've learned here like everyone processes information differently. Like I'm someone that reads physical books, but some people like to listen to it. Some people like to look at it on a tablet. So it's available in all of those forms on Amazon. Once again, the book is Mirage: How Social Media Impacts the Way We Think, Feel, and Behave. Um, to learn just more about the book in general, you can go to my website. It is themiragebook.com. And then I also have a Instagram and Facebook page for the book. So on Facebook, you would just put in the entire title, and you can find the business page for the book. And on Instagram, it is Mirage Book underscore. Uh, so on all of those platforms, I post information about the book and just about social media in general to give people a better feel for what's going on.
Tyler, that is incredible. And I am so happy that you decided to really highlight the effects of social media on us and put it in a guide, as I would call it. And really coming from, a person of color and how that affects us evenly. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. Folks, make sure you check out Mirage on Amazon. Y'all know where to find it. Till next time, peace.